The legalists are following a time-honored emotional journey where they start off with bad news. It's a no from God. God doesn't like you. God is separate from you. God's angry with you. God's going to be violent against you. And then if you're a good person, you will find your way through a narrow gate into God's love, which isn't really love because you had to do something to get there. And if you stop doing it, you'll be kicked back out into the outer darkness. Yeah. How deeply entrenched in our spiritual and psychological personality is this sort of doleful sequence where we journey from misery to a modicum of happiness. Isn't this how we often think? And this is so wrong.
Welcome to It Means What It Means, the podcast in which a guy with some college and a day job has long-form conversations about biblical texts. Today's guest is, one of the reasons that I started this. It's Douglas Campbell. So I'm going to keep the talking to a minimum up here on the front end. And actually, I don't think I will be here on the back end. So this is all that you'll have to listen to me. That said, if you're listening for free, please make sure you subscribe, follow, rate, review, all of those things on whatever platform it is that you use. Additionally, you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, any of the myriad social media platforms out there. And yeah, leave comments. Give me some feedback. Or you can reach out direct to me at itmeanswhatitmeans@gmail.com. All one word, itmeanswhatitmeans@gmail.com. And yeah, give me that feedback there. If you want it to be a little bit more personal, if you feel like calling me out publicly, hey, I'm your Huckleberry. And yeah, so you can also use the link in the show notes to become a Patreon supporter for $5 a month. And that 2026 preview episode is already available there if that's what you want. Okay. I don't think that I have anything else. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Douglas Campbell. Take care. Douglas Campbell, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Before we get going, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, gosh. That is a long and tangled story. Christian convert from a secular country, New Zealand. Walked the aisle at the age of 20. Became a charismatic, low church, soft, evangelical, Holy Trinity Brompton type zealot for Jesus. And I ended up, in short order, taking a very pretty young flame to Toronto, getting married, and falling in love with Romans and Paul through the work of Richard Longnecker in Toronto. And falling in love with, when I came back from grad school with a PhD, a little bit confused, falling in love with the Torrances and their appropriation of Karl Barth and James Torrance, and going, man, Paul is fascinating and Paul's scholars are getting him so wrong. Yeah, so I've taught in 3 different universities, 7 years in New Zealand, 7 years in London, which is wonderful, and then last 20 years plus at Duke in the States. And for much of my Duke time, I've been exposed to incredible colleagues, very enriching, greatly deepened my understanding, but also ended up getting tangled up with US prisons and incarceration and getting involved with really practical theology and seeing how Paul lands in a very concrete way, which has been hard, but also very meaningful, very enriching. So here we are.
Here we are. I feel like I have danced around the subject of Douglas Campbell quite a bit with Chris Tilling and John DePue and Andrew Rillera, Curtis Freeman. Actually, for a while there, I felt like, is this going to be the Duke University podcast? Because even like Brent Strawn and some others, which is fine. That's okay. You got to have a niche. And if mine is Duke University, I'd be okay with that. But this does feel like, the final boss of Duke University New Testament studies.
It's not. Trust me.
No, there's a secret
I
level.
don't know if Divinity School would be. The Divinity School's been incredibly supportive to me, which I've hugely appreciated. I wouldn't say a lot of my colleagues are convinced by me. They probably find me a little bit much, I think.
As someone who can be a handful, I'll say I feel like I'm in good company.
Yeah, we love each other. We don't always agree with one another.
You know what? I forgot Hauerwas. I don't know why he was the first of the Duke folks that I had on here.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
Stanley is
So
huge.
sorry, I'm doing name dropping, but I think about him a lot, and particularly about that conversation.
You should. You should.
Yeah.
Stanley is amazing. And he's deeper and smarter and kinder than almost anybody realizes. I mean, he really is the real deal, Stanley. And he's just a very great blessing to me, more than he realizes. So, yeah, if you're going to choose between Douglas Campbell and Stanley Hauerwas, choose Stanley Hauerwas. Seriously.
Well, fortunately, I don't have to choose, but I will say this is. So I sent him an email early on, and this is like I think I had an episode out. So even if he listened to podcasts, there wasn't much to go off of.
He wouldn't know what they
He
were.
would. And I got an email back with a phone number that said "call me," and I wanted to cry. And when I called him, I said, "Dr. Hauerwas, how are you?" And he said 82, and I was like, I love this man so much. Like I already liked his writing, and now I know that I love him because that is, I can't wait for 40 years from now when I can just say that I'm 82. Anyway, I'll stop. I don't want to eat up your time with anecdotes as much as I love telling them, but we're going to be discussing your chapter from a book about your book. So the book, and I've had Chris Tilling and Curtis Freeman on to discuss their their chapters or contributions they made. Beyond Old and New Perspectives on Paul, Reflections on the Work of Douglas Campbell. I'm assuming you're the Douglas Campbell in the title, but your chapter, it's one of your chapters here, Rereading Romans 1 through 3. And I felt like I reached out to Chris. I reached out to my friend Daniel. And I had a suggestion from Andrew Rillera on what I should talk about, but I wanted to get you on here quicker. And also the overlap, kind of distilling their suggestions down. I was like, rereading Romans 1 through 3. That's probably the best place to start. I will probably bother you to talk about more later, but I felt like, how should we be rereading Romans 1 through 3? Can we just kick it off there?
Yeah. It's the thing about rereading Romans 1 to 3 is it is part of a bigger read of Paul, and you're not going to get it if you don't have certain things in place. But my reading of Paul, it's a positive project. So it's not, if you start off with Romans 1 to 3, things are kind of negative. Oh, there's something wrong here. And it's only wrong when you know what's right. And my convictions about Paul and the gospel are that Paul really gets it right, but he gets it right in Romans 5 through 8, where we have a God revealed through Jesus Christ on the cross and through the resurrection, ascension, and enthronement at the right hand of God. And we participate in that through the Holy Spirit. And what's established by that Easter revelation is two very, very important things. And one is that God is in complete control of truth and revelation and disclosure, which is what the apocalyptic people get right. And the control on all our God talk is Jesus. Jesus revealed through Easter. Jesus, who was delivered up and dies for us, is buried, is raised. So that's the control on all our God talk. And when we're not oriented by that, man, do we get lost. The story of American Christianity today is a Christianity that is lost. And it's lost because, as Barth saw with great clarity, it's lost its mooring in the truth of God revealed through Christ. Second thing is, the God revealed by Jesus Christ is a God of unqualified, limitless, bottomless expanses of love that burn into us and lift us into that companionship and fellowship. And that's it. That's it. That's the gospel. That's the good news. And when you get that, like Paul got it, and like the God I knew, there's something off about Romans 1 to 3. And if you read Paul through the usual reading of Romans 1 to 3, you lock up the gospel and imprison it. And you never get there. You never get to a God of love. You end up with a God of justice and a God of natural theology and a God of power and a God of violence. So the rereading of Romans 1 to 3 really matters once you get where you're meant to be going, not to mention where you're coming from. So the stakes are very, very high for how you read Romans 1 to 3. And a lot of Pauline scholars just don't seem to have made these theological connections. I wish to goodness they did, but I can't force them to. So that's what's going on with my reading of Romans 1 to 3. And when you come to Romans 1 to 3, like I do, like a Bardian, like someone who believes in a God of covenant and love, you have a crisis. You have an interpretive crisis. You read this and go, hey, is this guy schizophrenic? Is he not able to hold together his deepest assumptions? There is a chasm between the God of Romans 1 to 2 and the God of Romans 5 and Romans 8. There's a chasm. And what do we do with that? And out of that tension, suddenly, we've misunderstood what's going on here. We have literally misunderstood the argument. We've captured the argument and ended up with this false gospel in the name of Paul. So therein lies a tale.
So if I were writing you a letter, if I'm following, I guess, contemporary rhetorical models, I want to tell you what the letter's about up front. Is that what Paul is doing in Romans?
No. he's in a debate with very sophisticated opponents, and he's wooing an audience of Jesus followers who do not know him. But his representative is reading and interpreting the letter. So what he is doing is much like a political stump speech. He's laying out his wares in such a way that he's trying to take you with him, make you like him, make you get to know him, and make you think that what you think he agrees with, and it leads to this. And what they say is deeply problematic. And so what he's leading off with is something very sophisticated, something very clever. He's leading off with almost like a little drama where this is what these guys are going to say. And this is why it's slightly hysterical how worked up they are about things. It's humorous. It's parodic. They're too worked up about sex and sin and anger and righteousness. They're a bit over the top. And look how their gospel opening collapses on itself in a series of contradictions. And then look at how the Bible just crushes one of its key assumptions. So by the end of the first part of the argument, oh gosh, this guy's really smart that we're listening to. This stuff that we're going to hear, or maybe are hearing already, is clearly wrong. I wonder what the next topic is. The next topic is, well, what's the Bible say? What does Abraham say? Oh gosh, look, it supports him, not these other opponents. And gradually we're winding our way through a series of topics about why you should be a Christian and not a Messianic Jew if you're a pagan. Why should you stay Christian when Messianic Jews come along and try and colonize you and say, hey, everybody who wants to be a Jesus follower has to be a Jew? And Paul doesn't have a problem with Jews. He loves Jews. He doesn't have a problem with Messianic Jews, but he has a problem with people saying to his Christians, you need to become Messianic Jews. That's the problem.
Okay, so kind of, I guess, and then so you said Romans 5 through 8 is where he makes his point. I'm paraphrasing. That's not how you said it, but that's where. Yeah. So Paul's thesis is in 5 through 8.
Well, two theses, actually.
Okay, what are the two theses?
Yeah. Important questions. There are two critical questions. The teachers are turn or burn preachers, right? Hellfire and brimstone, makes sense? That is how they roll. And how do all turn or burn preachers roll? They frighten you with a future scenario where God is going to kill you if you don't do something. So you should do it. Okay, so they threaten you with anxiety and fear. So they have frightened Paul's potential followers at Rome. So Paul has got to say he's got to address the doctrine of God. What sort of God are we involved with? And it's a very common trick of people to push their God into the future. And Paul says, hey, we know what God is like because of Christ and his death on our behalf at the cross. And because of that, we know that God is actually not that sort of God at all. God is a God of limitless love. God is not going to condemn you. The hostile powers will condemn you, but God is greater than the hostile powers. It doesn't matter how much you're suffering. God is with you and will gather you in. He chose you before the foundation of the world. His plan will come to fruition. So that's the first question. What sort of God are we involved with? Second question is, what's the basis of ethics? Is the basis of ethics your attempts to obey the Bible, or is the basis of ethics what God has done through Jesus Christ? Very important question. And Paul's point is, well, what God did through Christ and the Holy Spirit is the basis of all activity and agency and righteousness here and now, summarized in baptism, empowered by the Spirit. Okay? He lays it out. So the teachers, his opponents, force him to address doctrine of God and Christian ethics, two crucial dogmatic questions. That's why Romans 5-8 is so important. Got
Okay.
it?
Yeah. So what's
That's
being
a lot.
what's
That's a
that?
lot. That's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
You see what I'm doing?
Yes.
I'm giving you a circumstantial explanation for a systematic discussion, which is what nobody is able to do, but everybody should do. Because Romans is a circumstantial letter, like every other letter that Paul wrote. And if you can't explain why Paul's discussions are not landing in the particular church's concerns, you're doing something anachronistic and ultimately irresponsible.
Right. It's not a systematic theology or
Exactly. And
okay.
everybody reads it that way.
Yeah, they do. Okay, so the ethical concern when reading Romans 1-3, what what is being posited and that you're proposing is coming from the mouth of an interlocutor
Yeah.
is moral failing. That's all it is. Everybody knows it, with or without the law, and the law was a remedy for that failed like everything else. And
No. They think it
no,
works.
they
You're
think it
half. You're
works.
half right. You're half right. But the opposition are they're believers in the law. They're Jews. They're Messianic Jews, and they actually have a position on circumcision, which is similar to the position in Philo. Andrew Rereading is right about this. Philo justified circumcision by saying it literally snips off the part of your body that is most filled with lust. So you set yourself free from these desires that pagans have that disorder their lives. And then you're able to obey the instructions in the law of Moses and the teachings of Moses. Like you treat them like an instruction book. And then you show up on the day of judgment and God goes, well done, my good and faithful servant. Enter into your master's joy. And you're one of the sheep. And other people front up on the day of judgment and God goes, you did not act righteously. You're going to go into the lake of fire. So this is what it's a very simple system. It's legalistic. They're legalistic people who believe in legalism. When you introduced your final point about the law will crush you, that's Paul's final point, which is actually, and it's fascinating because the Jewish legalists are meritocratic, and meritocracy is much debated in America today. And when you have an unequal society, and you promote meritocracy, you promote inequality and cruelty because people are starting in different places. And if I proclaim meritocracy to you and I say God is meritocratic, but you have a nature that disorders and draws you into sin, that is a cruel system. And this is what Paul's saying. Your meritocratic system is not going to save anybody because people are just too damn sinful to do this, including me and including you. Nice move. So the opponents are Pelagians and Paul is an Augustinian. So the final bit of Romans 1-3 is Paul saying, hey, let's read the Bible. We haven't got a hope in hell of doing what you want us to do and getting saved on the day of judgment by being righteous. We're all damned if your gospel is correct. Which means, of course, your gospel is not correct.
Is it fair to say then that his answer is ultimately it is all and always has been a one-way street, that this is all predicated on divine love, and
Yeah.
the other pieces are, I won't say unimportant, incidental,
Secondary. You're
secondary.
exactly right. You're exactly right. Yeah, God's plan for us has always been positive. It's always been a yes. It's always been inclusive. It's always been the destiny of fellowship. And then sin derails that in a very serious way. And God has to liberate us from our entanglement in sin. And the benevolence of God pushes through and lifts us out of that situation, gifting us a new capacity. And so the gospel is good news first. And this is very significant. You're exactly right. When we're appreciating the love of God, the benevolence of God, the unconditional choice and initiative of God, our struggles with sin become even starker and deeper. In the light of God's grace, we see how truly lost we are and how broken we are. So we have a sharper understanding of sin, and we have a stronger ethic because we want to act in the right way. Because of this God of love and relationship, the pressure from this loving God through those around us who love us, this is what really changes behavior. Okay, so you're exactly right. It's a very perceptive observation. The legalists are following a time-honored emotional journey where they start off with bad news. It's a no from God. God doesn't like you. God is separate from you. God's angry with you. God's going to be violent against you. And then if you're a good person, you will find your way through a narrow gate into God's love, which isn't really love. Because you had to do something to get there, and if you stop doing it, you'll be kicked back out into the outer darkness. Yeah, how deeply entrenched in our spiritual and psychological personality is this sort of doleful sequence where we journey from misery to a modicum of happiness. Isn't this how we often think? And this is so wrong.
I know. So when I talked to John Depew about the book that you co-wrote, it reminded me of, what's that?
Shameless plug.
Yeah, go plug it. It's a good book. There's a part where I actually cried, and we had a conversation. I've talked about it on the podcast before. Leaving that that session at SBL in 2023, the Paul Within Judaism, I felt really demoralized. I felt like I don't know that there's any hope for me of having any kind of attachment to Christianity. This thing that I was raised in, and I took a step back, and I don't need to go into that, but I felt like it was this overwhelming anti-Semitism, not in that session,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
in the world around us, and the
yeah,
conversation in that session was so disappointing because I felt like you're the
yeah,
guys who need to, like, not the only ones, but the message has to come from somewhere to make its way into pulpits and into comment sections that are going to
yeah,
help us defend
yeah.
ourselves as a society from the kind of hateful nonsense that was
Yeah.
at that time seeping its way into my own home. Like I was at war with this stuff in my own home.
Yeah.
And reading that book, I hit a section where you guys were like, listen, this is very dangerous to talk about Judaism this way.
Mm.
And it
Mm.
felt like I had another opportunity. And it was that
Yeah.
and some other conversations with Chris and things like that. But this idea of retribution and
Yeah.
worthiness
Yeah.
from people who will insist that worthiness is not relevant. But to steelman them, I will say at their best, where they start the conversation, and this is sorry, this was a long road to get to this, but it reminded me of learning evangelism techniques. And I
Mm.
learned at least two of them, but one was the Roman road.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
starts with you suck. It
Yeah.
starts with
Yeah.
and
Right.
that is the steelman of the position of just like the world
Yeah.
is bad, look at all the evil around,
Yeah.
like crime and prisons and
Yeah.
genocide and starvation and disease. Look at
Yeah.
all of this that you
Yeah.
have earned.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
That's
what you're
right.
saying,
You
right?
did it. You did it. You're part of it. You're doomed. Yeah. Yeah. Totally. You're exactly right. It's very perceptive. These things are all connected. And it does proceed from the best of intentions, which is there is a time when you have to say that you suck. You do have to look at the world at a certain point and say, hey, this is a bit dismal. But man, you got to get that in the right place. And you do not want to lead off with it. That's a terrible idea. But it's well intentioned because it's trying to drive you emotionally to make a certain decision. But the way that you frame that initial situation, you suck, is going to be almost inevitably Constantinian. You're going to politicize it, politicize God, and set that whole situation up as a criminal situation, which will make you liable to God's infliction of harm and violence at the end of the age if you don't do something. So you turn God into a punitive deity modeled on the state. And you also set up an othering operation. So Christianity is based on a negative account of the non Christian. So you got to find a way of saying that, or your whole understanding of yourself collapses. So you're intrinsically committed to being kind of mean about all the people on the outside of the church and being in a superior position where you tell them what's wrong with them, even if they're not relating to that at all. So, yeah, built into the structure of the model is a commitment to violence and a commitment to othering. And it's particularly pernicious when you use Paul because the othering is done with Jews. So you other the Jews. So to become a Christian, you got to leave that Jewish crap behind. But you need Jews to exist and you need them to be full of crap to run the model. So it's got a very, very sinister underbelly, this model, very sinister. And the consequences are all around us today. Yeah. So it's so sad because I was just thinking about this last night. I was at a Kate Bowler event in Anne Lamott, and two incredibly deep spiritual women who get it and they know God, they love God, and the God that they're proclaiming and engaged with is a God of gentleness, inclusion, affirmation, healing, benevolence, a God that folds you in, that wants to fold you in. It's very good news. It's a very gentle, loving, exciting, illuminating, personally transforming gospel. It's a gospel of joy. If you're a Christian, you should be walking around with a smile on your face. For goodness' sake, that should be the first. That should be what you lead with. Hey, I know Jesus, and I'm kind of happy about it. Come and join the party.
I think I'll be honest. I think that conversation might come across as a little bit obnoxious, but I think there are. I think there are extensions of that. So my dad, I was talking to my dad recently, and there's a family member who is aging who needs someone to help take care of them. and he said, I realized if I could do something material for someone that I'm telling I will pray for, there's no reason that I think the way he said it, I need to stop praying and go do the thing. Right. And I
Oh,
was like, you could
nice.
certainly do both. But yeah, I think
Mm.
this has become my catchphrase at the end of the episodes now is if
Yeah, I
you get a
like it.
chance to love someone, you should take it. Or please
Yeah,
take it. And a lot of
yeah.
that was motivated around a conversation on what love is and the ordo
Mm.
amoris, or whatever the Latin phrase is. Um, and I think it really just is as simple as like if you get an opportunity to love someone and take care of them, that should be the thing that you do. And I'll actually, I know that at least in the book with Depew, you guys kind of address Tom Wright's Pauline scholarship. But I will say the thing that I keep coming back to is his metaphor of a 5-act play where we only have 4 acts and we're improvising. So I think the eschatological
I like
design,
that.
that
Yeah,
it's a beautiful metaphor.
I
And
like that improv. Yeah, I
yeah.
like that.
Well, and
Mm.
Samuel Wells actually takes that and just runs with that ball in his book,
Yeah,
Improvisation.
yeah. Great book.
Um,
It's
that
I cited actually. Yeah, I learned a lot from it.
he's, yeah, I love him. I've had him on twice now. I love talking to that dude. But this idea that like, hey, you know what the world should look like, and you're responsible for conducting yourself that way. And I think that very much is in line with the idea that like, hey, start the conversation with love, even though, as you're saying, Paul starts the conversation. I'm picturing somebody walking into a room and saying, and another thing is like he starts his letter in the middle of a fight with someone else rather than saying like, hey, you know, divine love is the foundation of all existence and that's why we have, he goes right into a fight. You don't necessarily
He's
have to
in a
do that.
fight.
He's in a fight.
Yeah, he's in
Yeah.
a fight.
I
Yeah,
know
he's
there's no
in a
question
fight.
there. That was just kind of rambly.
No, no, no. That's helpful. Yeah, but in terms of being obnoxious, I take your point. But actually, if we don't need to be quite so heavy, I think it's important that we love people, obviously. But I think in the first instance, just be a good friend and just hang out. Just listen. And I know what's right for me. I have very strong opinions about what's right for you, but I'm learning more and more that those opinions are judgmental and should not be taken too seriously. And I want you I'll support you in your journey to figure out what God is asking you to do, which may be a little different from what I'm getting. Um, so that's how I would think about relating to the world. And it's tricky because with the prison thing, I don't want to arrive and say, "Hey, I'm here to meet your needs" off the top. I want to arrive and say, "I'm here to befriend you. I value you. Tell me what it is that you want, and I'll see if I can handle that. But let me give you the dignity of defining your own needs. Because if you get too need folk, I'm not saying you're doing this, Jared, but I know some folks that do. If you get too need focused, you're replacing one form of aggressive paternalism with another form where I frame the other as a victim as against a criminal. But I'm still patronizing you or matronizing you by framing you as somebody I understand. I know your needs. I will meet them once you admit it. You see my point?
That's, yeah, no, that's fair. And look, it's a valid critique because 99.9% of my understanding of love has developed over the last 18 years being a father. That is like
Yeah, there you go.
drawing a circle around that kid and you know, and then the 2 kids that came along in my life later. It has been, that is my understanding of love, and it
Crucial.
certainly works out in my favor to put me in a place of strength where I get to provide. And as a recovering codependent, I will say it's much more rewarding for me to be able to give. So I take that as the critique that it is. And no, I think I'm mostly right, but yes, there is a bit of help needed there. Yeah.
Yeah, the your point is very well made. It's so significant that you went to familial imagery, and I wouldn't reduce the gospel to familial imagery because we've got to have a space for people who are not involved in healthy families and are not involved with families but have friends. But I think the point is valid with those qualifiers. A proper understanding of God, as understood by Paul, has familial imagery at its heart: father, son, siblings. I don't think it's gendered imagery because it's transcendent, but he's using categories of deep, deep personal intimacy, and that's a sign that we're getting things right with our assumptions. The false account of the gospel will use legal and political imagery. They will step away from the familial to a place of much more limited obligations where the consequences for stepping out of line are much more punitive. And that's a sign that you've lost things. You've lost the plot. So pulling people back to the stories and the emotions of deep familial commitment is exactly where you need to be and where you need to be understanding God. So yeah, home run there, as far as I'm concerned, from you. Well done.
It's well, thank you. It's but it is inevitable, and to kind of look at contemporary political discourse, and we don't need to call anybody out in particular because this could be applied so broadly. There is this sometimes conscious but usually not appeal to like a Greco-Roman paterfamilias form of legal or
Yes.
political
Yes.
structure that
Mm.
I think actually, you know what, in a workplace,
Patriarchy. We call
well,
it patriarchy.
patriarchy, but hold on, because I brought this up before and I hate it. I hate in a workplace when they say we're a family, because with very few exceptions, in my experience, what that ends up being is someone in a position of power
Mm. Mm.
using that metaphor as
Mm.
leverage against others to
Yeah.
extract what they want, whether it's value or submission or whatever. And then I
Yeah.
think we have a political and a theological discourse that is framed as a patriarchy,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
so beneficial to the
Mm.
people who are already on top. Which, look, you brought up prisons a couple of times, and I think this is a really good bridge. How, like, can you go into any detail about how you ended up saying, like, oh man, this stuff in Romans, this stuff in Paul, I
Yeah.
need to go work in prisons?
Yeah. Um, well, that I mean, your point is very well made, because imagery gets co-opted all the time, and the point theologically of familial imagery is unconditional. So your relationship with your son is unconditional, right? You're never not going to be a dad. He's never not going to be your son. There's nothing you can do to
There's
change
nothing
that.
he can do about it.
Yeah. Whereas if you pull that exactly, if you pull, how old is he, by the way?
18.
Okay, you're
Yeah.
in the whitewater rafting years. It's nice that you're still so affectionate. Most people aren't quite this optimistic by the end of the teenage
He's the
years.
best. He's the best. He's my good news. Like,
Yeah,
his name is actually Evangelion.
lovely, lovely. Um, but yeah, co-opting that imagery and pulling it into a contractual and punitive and authoritarian situation is pretty sinister. And it does need to be called out just the way you did it. So well done, and do that. This is where we really need to control what's going on theologically. Yeah, because the abuse of family language is very dangerous. Yeah, prisons. You don't read the Bible and then go and do what it says. I'm a Bible professor, and I've been teaching on the Bible for, oh my gosh, 35 years over. And I know this to be true. As Stanley would say, when you get into new situations and the Holy Spirit is opening your eyes to new dynamics, then you see that the Bible was talking about this. And so you're enriched by the Bible, you're clarified, your conversation, your language, your stories, all that kind of stuff. The language kicks into gear and you will need it. But I honestly didn't notice the prison staff until we were personally impacted by something that a friend of our son's did when he was a junior, which was terrible. That kind of involved her and then me, just as people being supportive through a ghastly plea bargain and very, very long incarceration, which is as yet only halfway through. We experienced the American prison system. And then you go, oh my gosh, we've missed all this. Um, we've missed all this. The Bible's talking about this all the time. A lot of the Bible gets written in prison. But scholars sitting reading books in a nice office and reading books in a nice office, written in a nice office about prisons, don't know what a prison's like. You got to go into one. They're different. You got to get your body inside the prison. And it's like, oh, okay. Now I know what's going on here. Um, yeah, and all of a sudden, your eyes are open. It's a little bit like Bart. Bart was a prisoner. People forget this. But he was arrested, interrogated, and tried by the Gestapo and expelled. He escaped with his life. He would have been in prison and eventually hung if he hadn't been Swiss. He wasn't able to talk about it until very late in life, but he ended up going back into prison and eventually started preaching and using the language of inclusion. I am one of you, because he'd been there. I recommend prisons again, and I'm falling into my own trap here, but we often look at them as places of distress and pain, and they are that. They are that. But God is at work there. There are lots of Christians in prisons. There are lots of Christians who work in prisons, and they need our support. They need our kindness. They need our faithfulness. And they need us to listen and connect and reestablish the connections that prisons sever. People are so relational, and we are emotionally starving for the healthy face-to-face relationships that make us, that give us meaning and give us life. And all we have to do is visit prisons and set some of those things up. And it'll be one of the easiest, cheapest, and most meaningful things you ever do. That's what I found.
Have you ever seen the movie Walk the Line?
My wife keeps telling me to watch this.
So I'm going to.
I'm a big Johnny Cash fan, and I've got his stuff live at Folsom Prison, and the documentary is a delight.
So there's a scene. I'm gonna ruin a scene, if I may. There's a scene where he's in the board, like he's in the conference room with all these executives, and he tells them he wants to do a show in a prison, and somebody says, "Well, Johnny, your fans they're good Christian folk. They don't want to hear you singing to people in a prison." And he said, "Well, I guess they ain't good Christian folk then." And I've thought about that probably every day since we've been emailing. I've thought about that line, and I know it kind of skews toward judgmental, but it was a very simple. And if you go listen to other clips of Johnny Cash talking about hey, the way we cure what ails us is stop doing X and start doing Y. I think he got it, and I think we all understand that love is much simpler than we make it out to be when we try to protect ourselves. It's simple, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
Love is tough.
Johnny Cash got it. He got it. He totally got it. And the documentary is classic, because he stands up at the very start of the broadcast and goes, I've been out the back with the BBC guys, and they told me I couldn't use all sorts of words with you guys like shit and crap, and couldn't curse and stuff. Those guys don't get it. It's not about them. It's about you. And away he goes. And he's 100% right. If you get into prison, what you'll experience is your glamorous ideas of how punitive righteousness corrects people and is clinical and heals and transforms will be instantly disabused, and you will see that the infliction of violence and harm is a process that is sickening. And what we're doing is simply making people sick. We're taking sick people and making them sicker, and the whole thing is just pitiful. The rhetoric of retribution is so glamorous, makes you seem like such a jock, I'm a man. But the reality is pathetic. Um,
Well, can I just say, okay, so this is a thing that I thought about when I talked with Depew, where if you create a moral framework that constrains God, right? Like the divine has to do these things
yeah.
because you're so bad, you have to be punished. Otherwise, somebody's got to take your place.
Mm,
So how, like, like, aside from the kind of perverse,
mm,
um the grotesque, Passion of the Christ kind of thing,
mm,
where is love expressed? But even that, like, even that expression of love looks so impotent compared to the bravado that they make it out to be. And I think when you do that with laws, that, like, oh, but this person had, man, they had this much cocaine on them, and, like, okay, but what is our remedy? But what is our remedy doing for that? And but then it just kind of, it bleeds over into other areas where, and look, the guys apologize for this, but I don't really care. Where when we're talking about the problem of homelessness, someone pitches jailing them and someone pitches involuntary lethal injection.
no, I guess.
And like, the issue of what he said notwithstanding, and it is an issue, the real problem for me is there's a misunderstanding of what the problem is. The problem in both of those, the problem implicit in both of those solutions is the presence of people who don't have homes in places you don't want them, rather than
Yeah.
the fact that they don't have a home, or that they are suffering from a drug addiction, or that they are suffering from mental illness, or any of the myriad causes of these things.
Yeah.
That's not the issue. It's their presence that's an issue. It's not an issue that this person, for whatever story that we have behind them, has X amount of cocaine on them. It's that they have the cocaine on them. And then you end up drawing about, well, what can I do? It's the law.
Mm,
It's the law. And you're just as weak and impotent as your God, who's boxed in by a
mm,
moral universe that dictates that, oh, suffering has to come from all of this horrible
yeah.
stuff. And again, I know that I'm being ranty, but I'm really worked
Um,
up.
well, yeah. I mean, and why not? It is emotionally charged, and if we don't get how emotionally charged it is, we won't be able to engage. But violence is emotionally charged, and there's kind of two things going on. There's two stories you can tell. Is the application of righteous violence the solution to future behavior and to past wrongs, or is something else the solution? And we are so strongly committed historically in the States to righteous violence. We really lose our way here. And this is where we need to be laser focused on the God revealed through Jesus Christ, who reveals, properly understood, that violence is evil and violence is the problem. Violence is itself a depersonalizing, destructive, and corrosive act. Um, and we need to resist it in a way that recognizes it very clearly and provides alternatives. And we'll come up with justifications, and we'll twist and distort our theology to fit in with our deep commitments to violence, which are based on anxiety. It's based on a world that makes me anxious. It's I'm frightened of you. You could be an enemy, and I'll threaten you so you stay away from me. And if you step out of line, I have to hurt you so that I'm credible as a violent person. And this predates the state. This is an old human story in the Bible. It's the second story, Cain and Abel. Cain murders Abel. The Bible's well aware of how deeply entrenched the violent story is. But my reading of the cross, my reading of Romans 5-8, my reading is that God saves us through Friday and Sunday. The cross is not an act. If you just limit Jesus' work to Friday, you have to find a way of making God act through the Roman authorities who publicly tortured Jesus to death. That's the gymnastic flip that you have to do. You must identify the Father who offers up his Son and saves us through the assumption of our sinful nature, the termination of our nature and then the gifting to us of a new nature through the resurrection, you've got to lose that whole Jewish bit, that whole Sunday, the whole resurrection, focus on the Friday, and then you're done. You will project your own politics and create a God of violence. And this is where we are. This is where we are for just the reasons that you've articulated. And it requires such clear-sightedness and such moral courage to stand up at this moment and say, violence is evil. Violence is not the solution of the problem. Violence is the problem. Due apologies to Ronald Reagan, but I think my version's much better than his.
Yeah, no. You know what? I'm going to cut that out. He doesn't get an apology. No, it is.
So was I following up correctly on where you were going with that, Jared?
I don't know. No, yeah, yes. No, that's absolutely. It's, I think.
Well, perhaps I just
go ahead.
It back. We're emotionally involved with the political situation in the States, and we're discussing prisons and violence and punishment. Do you see how closely all of this is bound up with how you read Romans 1-3? If you're a violent person, if you're someone who's committed to the politics of violence, you will read Romans 1 and go, of course God is like this. Of course this is Paul. Of course this is my apostle. Of course this is where the gospel begins. And you will unfold those assumptions and read that passage in a certain way. Now, you'll have to do some flips. But when Paul extrapolates the erasure of Jews, you're not going to have a problem with that because you're a Christian. But if you come to that argument and you're shaped by the gospel of Romans 5-8 and its abhorrence of violence, its detection of violence as evil, if you're shaped by 1 Corinthians 1, where God dies with the despised and the shamed and goes to untold lengths to reach them through the cross, you're going to go, what the hell is going on here? I've got a God who dies for me even when I'm guilty, and I've got a God who kills me if I step out of line. Which one of these two gods is the right one?
And this is the challenge, I think, of the challenge that has been created by systematic theology or by topical sermons. And it's that you grab the pieces as they seem to match and you put them together. And so it's not taking even as large a chunk as 1-3 or 5-8, it's taking Romans 3:23. Right? Like, this is an assertion. And they'll take from Romans and they'll construct, I guess you could say, a narrative, but it really is just like a proposition of like, see, we've all sinned and fall short of the glory of God, right? Wages of sin is death.
It works.
Right? And you can work, and here's the problem, Douglas. They go in order. And so it fits within our brains. And so
yeah. We're Constantinians.
What's that?
We're Constantinians. The church, 99% of the church is Constantinian, which means it doesn't have a problem with the state. It's accommodated to the state.
Which is so weird in America.
Yes.
It's so weird. I remember getting into arguments on the whatever, closest Sunday to the 4th of July is. And like, hold on. We're reading what passage? Like, the sermon is on what passage? Like, submit yourself. Submit yourself to, like, huh? Isn't our nation predicated on revolution? Like, aren't we predicated on the idea? Like, it's a bizarre collage of things that happens in churches, and if it validates the part of you that is angry or anxious or scared, I don't think you have to do much conscious thought about it.
Well, you don't. Yeah, you're exactly right. Well, I mean, if the flag's up the front, waving, fluttering by the cross.
So I think I read like a Richard Horsley book or something years ago, and he talked about the Romans putting an eagle on top of the temple, right? And some Jewish revolutionaries going up there and throwing that thing off. And then the next time I was visiting a church, I noticed there was an American flag that had the eagle on top of the flag stand. And I thought so this had to have been like 2004, 2005. And I thought about that and I was just like, this almost seems like a bit. This just seems absurd.
It's
It
not
would just be a
absurd.
detail in a sketch comedy thing.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's understandable. This is where we've been shaped and formed, and this is why Stanley's conversation with the peace churches is so important. I think to kind of set us free, give us a new way of understanding what's going on politically, so we can reread things. Just on the point you were making before, so helpfully about 323, Jared. Unfortunately, when Paul's letters were edited into the version that we have them in now in our Bible, sort of end of the second century, they were organized in terms of length. And Romans is just the longest, it just beats out First Corinthians. And I often ask myself, gosh, if only Paul had decided to write more about the collection in First Corinthians and it had been the first letter in length, we would have started off all our thinking about Paul with First Corinthians 1 and 2 and the theology of the cross and election and the God of the Trinity, the Holy Spirit gathering us in. And things might have been very, very different. But it's just a quirk of fate that we ended up with Romans. We ended up with this opening argument. We ended up with a very sophisticated argument by Paul that relies on performance. And in a Bible, in a canon, you've lost all the performance, you've lost all the local cues. So it's so easy to misunderstand this. It's so understandable that people got the wrong end of the stick. It really makes sense. Once you've got the parting of the ways, and Christians are not worried about dumping on Jews, it becomes even easier to read it the usual way. Once you've got Constantinianism, you're signing off on the death penalty. You don't have a problem with it. The death penalty is no longer being inflicted on you for being a Christian. You're inflicting the death penalty on people who step out of line. So you get a complete flip in how you understand Romans 1. And it's so understandable. It requires a lot of effort to get back there and go, hey, something's off here. Yeah.
Yeah, and it has been a battle, right? We don't need to
I
go into that.
I don't even think it merits the name of a battle. I think it's more like it's more like a guerrilla war in the swamps of Florida. It's, but hey, I mean, hopefully we'll win.
Yeah, I mean, time will tell, right? I know I, for one, appreciate a message that starts with love.
Mm.
And if somebody else can do that with a different interpretation, I'll hear them out. If you're listening, you're welcome to shoot me an email and let me know that you want to come on here and talk about that. I am more concerned about hearing about divine love than I am about hearing about divine retribution. We're more than capable of retribution with our own human hands.
Yeah,
I just
you're
don't know
right.
how much more of that we need in our brains.
We need none. Yeah, we need to be cleansed. We need to
Um,
we need to repent, actually, and we need to repent on the right and the left, because the left uses the rhetoric of violence as well. Yeah,
I mean, sure, fair. I mean, fair enough. I'm not uh, because we're approaching an hour, and I'm sorry I used up so much of that time venting, but I appreciate the therapy session, even though that's not your specialty.
actually, I'm used to students going to doing my prison courses, and then it does emotionally connect, and in different ways, and I'm always delighted because this is where the real work gets done. Understanding the gospel is emotional, and understanding what's gone wrong is emotional. So don't apologize, please, for being connected to these issues. This is a good sign. I commend you for it.
Well, thank you. So I will say, I'd like to ask, where would you recommend listeners read, watch, listen to? But before that, is there an organization or something that people could go to find out how to start helping out at prisons near them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can't. Yoke Fellows is pretty good. It's got Mennonite roots. Um, Also, usually a church has someone who is involved in prisons already. There'll be a person who's just been called and plugged in, and they're often a good person to start with if someone's already doing it. And also, I always reach out to the chaplains in the prisons. Most prisons have chaplains. There are different sorts of chaplains, but many of them are very, very good people, and they'll set up the access for you just to go in. It's a great question. Thank you for asking. Prison Fellowship is there. You'll have gathered from the podcast that the theological position of Prison Fellowship is not something I'm always comfortable with, but God's been working through slightly problematic theology for a very long time, including mine, and their sociology is spot on. They will get you in there. So thank you. Yeah, that's a great offer. I hope folks will connect.
I will. The groups you mentioned, I will throw them in there. I'll see if there's like some kind of a unified, prison chaplains organization that maybe people can look up their website. So as far as Romans stuff goes, where so obviously your book with John Depew, any of your other books,
Yeah.
what else would you recommend that listeners look into? Here for Depew again, his YouTube channel.
That's the one.
That's the one. Oh,
That's the one. And John's YouTube channel, Apocalypse Here, has got a couple of videos on this. I have stuff. If you just Google, if you go to YouTube and just put in Douglas A. Campbell or Douglas Campbell, I'll come up in various conversations, behaving very badly in some of them. So just bear with me. But in the ones on Romans, yeah, I do spell it out. And I just gave a series of talks at the BART conference, at the BART and Incarceration Conference this summer at Princeton, and they're on reading Romans 1 to 3. And they'll go up on YouTube soon, and I'll put the information on my website. DouglasCampbell.me is the domain, appropriately for a grandiose scholar like myself who battles self-importance daily.
that's at least you're battling it. Many don't. What do you read for fun?
That's a great question. I'm a huge Patrick O'Brian fan. The greatest historical seafaring novels of all time. Wow, I love that guy. I read him repeatedly. And my brother's put me on to Mick Herron, the Slow Horses author, recently. He's terrific. He is just terrific. And I've got Jonathan Haidt's The Anxious Generation by the bed at the moment. I'm also dabbling in spirituality. I'm trying to become a little deeper and more serene. So I'm getting into some of the spiritual literature. I was reading Thomas Merton for a little bit there, and I have to go and talk to the Sisters of Julian of Norwich at some point. So it's definitely time I started reading Julian, although I'm not sure that'll be light bedtime reading. Wish me luck.
Yeah, go with God. No, that's all good. So I'll have that stuff in the show notes as well. Douglas Campbell, I will be bothering you again once I've had time to read more of your work.
Yeah, circle back. It's fun.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here today.